but what I want to try to do is sort of frame the Constitution, put it in perspective for us today, how we've been affected by this, and what we need to do as citizens to take care of our rights. The only people that are going to watch out for our rights that are guaranteed to us is we the citizens. If we become passive, apathetic, we're going to get what we've got coming down the pipe right now. If you understand this, you know how to use this, you know how to quote this, you know what? You're going to get everything that you need, and we need to understand this. Now, let's start out with, how did we start?
Does everybody have one to begin with? I'll pass mine.
Does everybody have one of the constitutions here? Who doesn't? Okay. This is for the sight impaired, such as myself. This is big text. You don't need your reading glasses. That's why I printed them this way. Okay, how did we develop the Constitution? Well, we had 13 colonies. And these colonies were made up of people that fled from England and the oppression that happened there. Now, these individuals formed states. These states came up with a confederation. This confederation didn't work as well as they wanted it to, so they pulled back together and they decided to put together the Constitution. The concept here is, who came first? It was the people. Who does the government work for? The people. Who does the government answer to? The people. Now, this is essentially a working contract between we the citizens and this government that we have. Now, you'll be amazed at how many of these elected officials, big-time officials, that supposedly know the Constitution and they know what they're talking about. They can't quote you this, they can't tell you anything about this. Everybody know who Chuck Schumer is, do they not? Chuck Schumer. This guy's brilliant. Somebody asked him, this is about 5 years ago, how many branches in the government? He says 3. They said, well, can you tell me what 3 branches there are? You will not believe this. He says the House, the Senate, and the executive. Oh, you know, this guy's an idiot. All right. Now, it got even worse. 3 days later, somebody wanted to ask Nancy Pelosi the same thing. You know what she said? That's so stupid, I'm not even going to answer. That's because she couldn't remember the 3 branches. Okay, now, we're going to look at the Constitution. Article 1. This is the legislative branch. I want you to look at how many pages are in there. Okay, in here, the legislative branch represents who? We the people. Okay, now, this changed back in the 1913 when the Senate became we the people instead of the states. Okay, this was initially set up so that the states were represented. We had 3 different entities. Now, this actually screwed us because the states actually have to look after us, and we, as a large state, can actually fight back against the federal government. Now, they took that away from us, and they took that away from the states, and now what happens is we have somebody that's elected every 6 years, and the only time that they are ready to answer to us is when? Election time. Other than that, they think they're untouchable because they only have to perform as a monkey once every 6 years. Okay? Now, on the other hand, the government was set up, or I should say the legislative branch was set up so the people answer to us. That would be our representatives. They have to answer to us every 2 years. Why? Because they got to perform. Now, in the New Mexico Constitution, they did not address this because they were already in the midst of rolling us over so that our Senate was then elected by the people. But in other states, if that individual that represented the state, and by the way, there's 2 from every state, if that individual is not representing the state appropriately, they could call them back, get rid of them, and send somebody else down there to watch the states. Now, the other thing that's important to look at here, as we're blowing through here, is we need to know what the legislative branch can do and what they can't do. And if you look at Article 8, in here, this talks about what they're allowed to do, what their responsibilities are. And this is referred to as the enumeration of the Constitution. Now, we won't go through all of these, but Section 8 is what they're allowed to do. Section 9 talks about what they're not allowed to do. This is very, very, very important. This puts them in a little box that says, this is all you're allowed to do. And as we start talking about some of our other rights, we'll come back to this. Now, something that's very important too, if you look at Section 7, first sentence, all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. How many people are familiar with the Obamacare Act? Oh, and I'm sure everybody here loves it, right? Where did that come from? Where did that originate? Correct. And who sponsored it?
McCain,
No.
Clinton, and Kennedy.
Kennedy sponsored it and got a couple goons. This is totally illegal. Now, why? They started out and they called this a penalty. They can't penalize us. That's not their job. So we had Roberts and the boys up in the Supreme Court. They decided to call this a tax.
Yeah.
It was a tax. Now, what happens? That null and voids this whole thing. Now, there should be a big fight. They have had several fights on this, and I think we get another one coming up. But this makes this whole thing illegal. If we know that, guess what? We don't have to comply. So that's pretty big. Now, the other thing I want to mention here is militias. How many people understand what a militia is? Is this something bad?
No.
Is this something constitutional?
Yes.
Is this something we need to have in order to protect ourselves from a tyrannic government?
Yes.
Okay. In the legislative branch, Article 1, how many times is the militia mentioned? 3 times. This isn't a misnomer. This is there for a reason. Okay, people are going to tell you militias are bad, you're organizing a bunch of terrorists, and these individuals, you need to watch them. Yeah, the government needs to watch us because we're watching them. Okay? So, now, when we go from the legislative branch, then we head on over to, oh, well, let me drop back to Section 8 here. Section 8, second line, it talks about general welfare. Okay, man, they abuse this a lot. Everything that they try to do is for the general welfare of our government, our people, our citizenry, because they're there to look after us. They're supposed to take care of us. That's their job, correct? No. Okay, what did general welfare mean back in the 1700s? Anybody know? Okay, the way you can check this out is the first American dictionary was Noah Webster, and I believe it was 1813, 1814. You look this up. General welfare meant you didn't overspend, you didn't have debt, and you took care of business so that everybody was free of debt. General welfare. Over time, that has changed. And this is where this comes in, living constitution. There's no living constitution. You can't predict what that statement or that word is going to be 200 years down the road. How many people know what intercourse is? Okay. Does everybody know what intercourse meant back in the 1700s? Anybody? It meant the exchange of ideas, trade, etc. Didn't mean what it means today. You think anybody could have predicted that? No. So there's no such thing as a living constitution, all right? That wipes it out right there. Somebody says a living constitution, you mention intercourse and watch them turn red. Okay? All right, now we're going to go on to a very sketchy area here. And we've got one of the best presidents in the world to make point of. Article 2 looks at our executive branch. Now, look at how many pages are in the executive branch. Way less than what you saw for the legislative branch. We the people. Okay? He has very little powers. How does the president, since Lincoln, try to govern us? Executive orders. Now, if you have executive orders, you got one man making law, because that's what they do. What is that? It's a monarchy. Do we have a monarchy?
Yes.
We have been guaranteed a republic, and I'm going to show you where that's in the Constitution. Now, so, does this president, can anybody find in Article 2 where this president has executive authority? Zero. So anything that comes out of that office other than Thanksgiving, we're going to run a flag up a pole, we're going to run it half-mast, we're taking the day off, that's all he's allowed to do. The rest of this stuff that they've been writing for years is garbage, and every president has done it. This president, though, is really taking it to the hilt. Now, I'm sorry, any questions? Now, I'm interactive, so if you guys want to point out something or ask something, please feel free. Yes, sir.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on Marbury versus Madison before, unless that's coming up later.
That would come up later, okay? Now, once you look at this, basically the italicized stuff is amendments that have taken place and changed, and that's what is in here. Yes, sir.
You say the Constitution is not a living document. I would say it is. It's called the amendment process.
That's not living, okay? We're changing that, and you'll see this in Article 5. That has nothing to do with changing given time. We are allowed to change and amend our constitutions, but
That's
only...
what I mean.
Well, that's not living, okay? The living definition means that they use to try to stir up our Constitution
Their
to
definition
say
is
the
wrong.
definitions change, okay? So when you listen to a living constitutionalist, you have to press them on all the definitions, okay? And you are correct, we can change that. Now, basically, the president's job is to sign bills if they meet constitutional standards. Am I correct? Okay, he's not to legislate, he's not to write bills, he is to look at bills that are in front of him and evaluate them to make sure, one, it meets constitutional standards, two, the welfare of the country, is this going to cost us a lot of money? Is this going to put us in the hole? Is this going to be fiscally sound? And lastly, is this going to violate any of our sovereign rights? That's his job, and that's expressed in here. Now, also talks about civilian powers over the military. Nowhere in here does the president have authority to wage war, does he? No, he does not. Who has that ability? Congress. Who's Congress answer to? The people. We the people. Okay, now, they came up with the War Powers Act to try to stir up this. Now, would the War Powers Act meet constitutional standards? No. Therefore, it's invalid on its face. And we can get back to like Mulberry, tons of these. If it does not meet constitutional standards, it's null and void on its face. Okay, the rest of it there just sort of looks at, small responsibilities. He does not have a lot of responsibilities. Now we get to Article 3, third branch. That takes up one page. You see a pattern here? The people, the executive branch, judiciary branch. Gets smaller. Okay, but all three of them should balance each other out. How does the government go about usurping our rights? They try to grow their power. They try to overextend what they're allowed to do. Are we seeing this now?
Yes.
We're seeing this everywhere. Yes?
Is that how judges kind of overrule whatever we vote for and they don't like?
Their job, the judges, particularly the Supreme Court, is to look at the constitutionality of whatever's brought in front of them. Do they do that? No, they try to legislate from the branch. Have they been doing this recently? Yes. Have they been doing this for a long time? Yes, this is growing. All three branches are constantly fighting to try to expand their authority. By doing so, they're usurping our rights. Now, who is allowing that to happen? It's we the people. Okay, we are. It's our responsibility. We've got to fight them, we've got to push them back, and we have to let them know that we understand this Constitution. This Constitution is here for us, we the people. Now, if you look in here, this is pretty basic. It talks about the judicial powers, talks about the court's responsibilities. A couple things have changed, and it talks about the rights of we the people. I want to talk about one thing here. This would be in section 2, the last paragraph, trials of all crimes except in the case of impeachment shall be by jury. In New Mexico, we have traffic laws, correct? These traffic laws are misdemeanors. There's only 2 states in the union that they're misdemeanors. New Mexico is one of them. Do we get a trial by jury? No. We get to go in there, they essentially act like they're administrative. Even if they find you not guilty, they hit you for $80, $100 for court fees. Does that meet constitutional standards? No, does not. So, we're getting hammered every day at the local level as well. Okay, treason, that can be very interesting. I don't know if we need to go into that, but I think we've got several presidents in the past that are very treasonous. Now, we get to the second part of the Constitution. The first part deals with all 3 branches. Is there any questions along the lines of the 3 branches and how they're supposed to interchange with each other? Okay. Now, we get to Article 4. This talks about how states are to interact. You know, we're supposed to honor each other's laws. Citizenry, we're supposed to be able to move around. How do we bring in new states? And by the way, we're fairly new. We came in 1912. And then here's the biggie. I told you I was going to show you where we are guaranteed the republic. Okay, Section 4 of Article 4, Section 4. It guarantees us a Republican government in all states. Now, what's a Republican government? We have a senator here that goes around and talks about we have a representative democracy. Do you know who that is? That would be Mr. Udall. Okay? He does not believe in the Constitution. He and I have gotten into this a couple times. He'll never talk to me again. So this guy here believes he believes in a living Constitution. This Constitution is wore out, and we now have a representative democracy. Does that mean he's representing me or you? No. He's representing that paycheck that he's getting. Okay? And that paycheck tells him how to vote and who he represents. So we got big problems there. Okay, Article 5. We were just talking about this, and the gentleman that's coming in, what was his name? Meckler. Mark Meckler. This is big for him. Now, we were talking about how do we change the Constitution. Here it is. There's really 2 ways. Okay? Somebody in either the House or the Senate can introduce an amendment, or we can have a constitutional convention. Now, has this happened before? We have not had a constitutional convention, but we've got how many amendments? 27. I had somebody once say 32. It's amazing.
That's Obama math.
That's Obama math. Actually, that's Bush math too. So, we have changed a lot of things in the Constitution. And again, when you look at the main body of the Constitution, anything that's italicized in here has been amended by amendments. Now, here's the rub. How do we shore up our Constitution? How do we get around this? All we have to do is look back in history. The Magna Carta, over 800 years ago, gave us the right to have a trial by our peers for crimes committed in our state or our district. Now, we had King James I, 1600s. Oh, he was upset. He didn't like these people over here in the colonies because we were rude, crude, and we didn't want to comply. So, how did he get around this? He came up, and I don't know if you've heard this, but he came up with the Star Chamber. Have you heard that? Star Chamber is a place where we pull them in. We're going to have one person try you, hang you, sentence you, and then haul you out. And generally, if that happened over here in the colonies, they put you on a boat and shipped you back to England, and that was the last they saw of you. This is how they got around the laws of his land. Okay? Now, how do we get around these laws today? How do they shore up things? We have agencies such as the EPA, IRS, SEC. These guys have their own little courts. What do they call these courts? They're administrative courts. Are they constitutional? Do you see anywhere in here where we talk about an administrative law? No. Do these guys hand out fines? Do they hand out penalties? Do they put people in jail? All the time. It's amazing that people allow this to happen. It's amazing, even more amazing, that you got attorneys studying administrative law. It's like, you know, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, there's been multiple cases where people have tried, challenged in an Article 3 court. By the way, that's the court that we're responsible to, the Article 3 court. And guess how most of those rulings go? The administrative court does not have jurisdiction, nor do they have force. That's a term used back in the 1700s, meaning you have the Constitution to back you up. And in a lot of cases, they're overturned. But the trick here is you don't allow them to have jurisdiction, okay? You tell them right up front, you have no jurisdiction. I answer only to the Article 3 courts and my constitutional rights, period. They'll usually run, okay? And I can tell you that personally because I've done it, okay? If they know you reasonably understand this, they'll come up with some mumbo jumbo, you're too small to deal with, you're not a bigger problem, I'll go take care of somebody else. You understand that, you give that to them, you let them understand that, and you quote the Constitution, guess what? These guys aren't stupid. They understand, and they'll make an excuse, and they'll head for the hills. Yes, sir?
Are you suggesting we should not file IRS 1040?
What I'm suggesting is, you understand your Constitution, you understand your rights, and you apply them the way you want to. Okay? That's what I'm telling you.
That was very political. Good answer.
No, that is correct, okay? Because my fight may not be your fight. Your fight may not be his fight. Okay, your issues might not be her issues. So this is an individual thing. But if you understand your rights, you understand the Constitution, you understand what they're not allowed to do, you can put it right in their face, and most of the time they'll back off. And I know lots of people that have done it. I'm not the only one, okay? Now, we're going to get into, excuse me, Article 6. Article 6.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you mind repeating those three things that you said we should know in order to make these guys back off?
No jurisdiction.
No jurisdiction, no authority, and my constitutional rights say I only answer to an Article 3 court at the federal level, okay? Now, we're not talking state stuff now, okay? This is all federal. It's a little different, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes at the state level. Okay, now, when we get to Article 6, some of this is cleanup work from when we transferred over from the Confederacy to the Constitution. We had a debt, and we carried that debt over. That's the first paragraph. Now, here in the second paragraph, this is very interesting. This is key to a lot of understanding the Constitution. The Constitution and laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuant thereof, and all treaties made. Not or, and. Okay, we got a case right now where they're trying to pass a bill or pass a treaty for Small Arms Act with the UN. Okay, would that violate any of my rights?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that would violate my Second Amendment right, your Second Amendment right. Now, what is this saying? This says anything that happens has to be pursuant to the Constitution. So, if these guys pass this bill, is this valid?
No.
Absolutely not. Now, if it said or and not and, they'd have an argument. But any treaty that's passed has to pass muster with the Constitution. If it violates any of that, it's invalid. Do we have to comply? Absolutely not. I'm only bound by the Constitution, and that we all are. Only bound by the Constitution. That also means any laws that are passed, because it also talks about the laws. Obamacare. We know, we just proved that it cannot be a law, because it originated in the Senate. Okay? So therefore it's not valid. Am I expected to comply? No. They might think I am, but I'm not going to comply. So, huge. That's a big one. Remember, Yes, sir.
Why didn't the Senate turn it down when it was presented that way to begin with? That if it began in the Senate rather than what it should have legally, why wouldn't the Supreme Court at that point in time say, we can't go ahead with this because it's unconstitutional?
Well, I don't know how those knotheads think, so I could not even venture a guess. I can just tell you it's wrong, it's not constitutional, and we just proved it, okay? This Constitution was written in simple terms so people like I can and you can understand this, okay? There's a couple tricks here that we've got to, there's a few terms that we've got to get back to Webster's dictionary so we can understand some of these things. Yes, sir?
I could be wrong about this, actually, through my recent term, recent events and passage of Obamacare. I believe politically, of course, it originated in the Senate, or became well-known by the politics of the Senate. But I
We're
think
talking Obamacare?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe the actual, the technical piece of legislation that was ultimately passed probably came from the House.
No, it did not. It came out of Kennedy's office, okay?
Right.
And they
And then
brought,
when it went to conference, didn't it go back to the House and then introduced as a formal bill? from
no,
the
it was
House?
introduced as a formal bill coming out of Kennedy's office, okay? And that's where it moved out. It did not originate any place in the House, period. All taxes have to come from the House, period. You can argue it any way you want, that's the Constitution. You could say Kennedy walked over and stepped in the House and said, I'm introducing a bill, and comes back over, and that ain't, you ain't buying it. Go
Well, I'm
ahead.
just curious, I mean, I don't know what the actual timeline was. I mean, my question is that, politically, in addition to all these 535 people interact with each other, I mean, the actual bill that was actually passed from chamber to chamber, you're saying the first passage of that bill came from the Senate?
It was introduced from the Senate, Kennedy. Now, you can't argue that. That's where it came from. If you want to argue that, then
No, I mean, I'm just curious if we're
No.
talking the same thing here.
we're talking the same thing. That bill originated in Kennedy's office.
Okay.
He was a senator. Therefore, it's illegal. Now, everybody who's arguing before the Supreme Court ruled that this is a tax, and that's how they're trying to weave around it. Okay? And then they go, well, we can't do anything about it now. It's already written. It's a tax and it's passed. Wrong. It's no longer a valid bill.
That's also how they did the,
Oh, they've done a
what they
lot.
call the Patriot Act, too.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one that came.
They've done a lot of things that are really bad. Okay, now, in Article 6, there's also something here that everybody needs to know about. This applies to our representatives and our senators. They have to take an oath. And this oath shall be bound, or the oath that they take, they'll be bound by the oath or affirmation to support the Constitution. Okay? I've got a senator, I won't mention his name, Udall, that understands this differently. He took his oath. He understands that we were guaranteed a republic, but he fights this by stating we have a living Constitution. Bull crap, okay? This guy doesn't represent anything other than his paycheck, okay? It's right here. He has to affirm or take an oath to support the Constitution, which takes care of us, we the people, okay? We the people are in charge. Hopefully you're starting to see a big pattern here. Now, we don't need to go into 7. They ratified this. Now, when we were fighting over the Constitution, we had two factions. We had the Federalists, who was led by Madison. And I'm going to get back to Madison. He's a pretty cool dude. And then we had the Anti-Federalists. And this group was pretty much led by Jefferson. Now, the Federalists were correct in what they said. We've built a small box. They can't get out of it. We don't need anything else. They cannot move out of there because we've got Section 8 and 9 of Article 1 that says, here's your small box. You can't get out of here. Well, history tells us that every government grows, every government becomes oppressive, and we need a way to protect ourselves. So the Anti-Federalists said, we need to have several amendments to the Constitution that give us the ability to protect ourselves. How many of them were actually introduced? Anybody know?
I think it was 15?
12.
Okay.
12. How many made it?
10.
Actually, 12 did. But the original 10 got started. 11 and 12 actually came in because they found that they were needed later. Now, the first 10 amendments are known as the civil rights, or Bill of Rights, civil rights, and these are very, very important. First one is, anybody know? Freedom of speech. Anything else? Religion. Anything else?
Press.
Press. Anything else? Big one. Grievance. Assembly and grievance. Okay? We're allowed to yell, scream, send letters, and they're supposed to answer to us in Congress. How many people have written your congressman and got a response?
Form letter.
Yeah. How many of you got like a real letter that was really written? None. You did.
That was ages ago, though.
Well, you're not that old. Yeah, it's all form letters. You know, any problem that you have can be answered by that form letter. And that's their answer. Okay. Now, we get on to the bill, or Second Amendment, right to bear arms. In there, it mentions a well-regulated militia. How many times have we mentioned this so far? This is number 5. This is number 5, militia. Militia cannot be bad, all right? This is spoken and addressed throughout our Constitution. Now, by the way, any amendments that are added to the Constitution are part of the Constitution, okay? But it's not a part of the original body. So, a lot of your living constitutionalists, this is where they want to fight you. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the Article 5 state amendment process.
Uh-huh.
And that is, I understand that the states can circumvent the federal government.
Correct.
They can hold their own convention of states to add amendments to the Constitution.
Correct.
But do you know if they can outright repeal previous amendments?
How would you do that? We've already got an example. 18th Amendment. What was that? Prohibition. That really pissed off a lot of people, didn't it? Okay, so what happened? We had another amendment. It's called the 21st. We repealed it. That's what you can do. If you want
But
to.
that was through the federal process, so if we
Oh,
take the
it's the
state
same-
route, it's the same thing?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's the
All
same
right.
thing. So, personally, I think the 16th and 17th Amendment need to be repealed.
Oh, absolutely.
This would
Yeah.
cure lots of our problems.
Yeah.
This would take away lots of power, and this would put the states back in control. Okay? How do we do that? We just appeal it. Now, the government has already learned this. They learned this through prohibition. Man, we write one, people get pissed off, we can change it. Who brought in all of this corruption through administrative courts and that? Our buddy Roosevelt, the New Deal, okay? From that point on, we have been screwed. So this is how they're fighting us. Now, we get down to the 4th Amendment. Quartering the soldiers, and we're probably not going to see that anymore. But it's there. They can't come in and just say, hey, we're putting up a company on your property, or we're putting a commander in your home, you need to move out until we're done. Sort of.
I don't know if it happened to individual homes, but during the Second World War, that was actually pretty common with a lot of private property.
I was unaware of that.
I mean, well, in terms of, you know, for example, in the place where I went to college back in Massachusetts, a good portion of the university campus was, you know, taken over by the Army.
Well, that's not private quarters, though.
No, it's not private quarters, absolutely. So I don't know if that,
Did anybody,
if it would be argued in any sense that that could fall into the same
well, it talks about private quarters here, and I don't know if you could say the university's private quarters.
Particularly, they took over the residence of some of the priests that ran the schools.
Well,
Anyways, I don't know. I mean,
no, if they took over the priest residence, then they're taking over private quarters.
But I don't know if that was a voluntary.
It would have to be voluntary, okay, if it was to be constitutional. They can't come in and just say, you're moving out, we're taking over.
Isn't
So-
that kind of what the Second Amendment's for? So you can't come into my house and take it over.
Correct. How many people pack? How many people openly pack? Okay, well, let me talk a little bit about our rights. if we don't exercise them, we're gonna lose them, correct? You can ask my father. But I'm on a university area right now, otherwise I got a 45, and 1911 here, 24/7. Is that right? I even sleep with it. And, but my wife wouldn't let me, she's afraid to go off. But I have packed for years. Why? Because I want people to ask me why I'm carrying it. 2, it gives me an opportunity to engage them. And 3, it also gives me an opportunity to pull out my Constitution, and half the time I can usually give it to them. And I'm practicing my Second Amendment rights. I'm not going to give it up. And you're correct. Why do we have the Second Amendment rights? They want to tell us so we can go hunting.
Protect us
No.
from our governments.
Yes. It is to make sure that the government understands we are in control. Now, you want to talk about the great experiment, the social experiment that we are? What's been different between us and all other societies that have failed? We're the only armed citizenry. Okay? So, if it ever comes down to push to shove, I guarantee you this grand experiment will survive. I guarantee it will. So, I hope it never comes to that, but let me tell you, everybody here right now understands where we're at. Everybody understands these preppers. Who hasn't run into prepper? What's a prepper? Somebody getting ready for the great apocalypse or the country failing? Survivalists. Who hasn't? Has anybody not? People are preparing right now.
Oh, yeah.
There's something that's happening. Some people can tell you, I know something's happening, but I don't know what it is. But everybody understands there's something big that's going to be happening here soon. Sir?
What's the definition of a well-regulated militia?
Yeah, it's a good question. What's the militia for? What was it primarily designed for? Well, you have to look back at, oh, I'm sorry, what's the definition of a well-regulated militia? We have to look back again at our forefathers and what they put together. Back then, we didn't have large armies. Now, when we talk about percentages or per capita, we still don't have a large army compared to well, not China, I'm talking our population. What's the percent of all individuals in the United States that serve? It's approximately 10%. That means all of us veterans and everybody that's currently serving. 10%. Now, out of that, what is the percentage of our population that's currently serving on active duty? 1%? 1%. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. Now, we want to tout that we got this army that we can kick anybody's butt. Well, there was 2 people, Hitler and Hirohito, that said, we're not going to invade the United States. Hirohito said, there'll be a gun behind every blade of grass. Every blade of grass. So we're not invading. Now, when we look back at the well-regulated militia, we had a very small army. We had to be able to protect our borders. Who does the militia answer to? Their local command, their local sheriff, their governor, the president. That's the chain of command. Anybody can call the militia up for service. Now, until 1933, that was the understanding of the militia. The government, who was always trying to grow and take away our rights, those 10 amendments that we have, decided that we had to have the National Guard. That now became what the government wanted us to consider the militia. That's not the militia, okay? Who funds the National Guard? The state does, but where does they fund paychecks. Where does the equipment come from? Federal government. Where's all the equipment, garb and everything? Federal government. Where does the bullets and beans come from? The federal government. We only pay their paychecks. So who really owns them? Okay? Now, when the Army or the National Guard is called up, does the governor have the chance to deny their units to go? Has it ever happened? It has happened. Okay, just recently happened about 5 years ago. Governor Perry turned down 5 units that were requested, and the government went crazy. Okay? You can't do that. He says, I'm sorry, but I'm the commander-in-chief of the National Guard. This is not appropriate. I need him at home. That's what we should be doing. Okay? The governor is in charge. Now, if you notice, abroad, you know what the percentage is that is National Guard and Reserve at this time? 70%. 70% of our fighting force, whether they be support or actual combat, 70%. I've got a friend that this December, he's going, and he's in the reserve, no, I'm sorry, National Guard, and he's going back for his 4th tour. 4th tour in 7 years. Now, this is ridiculous.
It's not guarding the nation.
No. And, you know, our governor should say no. This unit, this is the third time this unit is going. And this isn't right, okay? These people are pulled out. They're to be used for national disasters and local disasters. They're not utilizing our troops correctly. We should get involved in that. Now, was that enough to answer your question?
Well, I was member of the NRA for years,
Mhm.
and I packed, but I'm not part of the legal skill regulated militia.
Okay.
But the Second Amendment applies, but that's a question that continues.
They're supposed to, and prior to 33, they are supposed to supply and take care of the militia as they do the regular army.
What's the militia? You pack, I pack.
Okay,
We're not part
the
of
militia, by definition, when you read this, is any able-bodied male between 18 and 45. Period. That's the militia. Okay? Now, if you don't want to be in the militia, you go, I'm not in the militia. Okay? But that is the militia. That was the understanding, and that's how they started the
But
militia.
how does it apply now? What's the current militia?
The current militia is any unit that puts themselves together to defend
So
themselves.
what's the unit? I'm not a part of the unit.
Well, you might want to look into one up there. You talk to me afterwards and I'll get you hooked up. Okay? I'll get you hooked up with the people here in Bernalillo, okay? I know of 2 units. And you can talk to them and they can help you with respect to where you live. I happen to be in a unit in Lincoln County. We've got a very large contingency down there. And I'm just one facet of it. What are we here for? We're here to defend ourselves. And we're constitutional, okay? We're not intending to overthrow anybody. We're there to protect ourselves. And everybody in here, is there anybody here that feels safe from our government at this time? I don't. So, but that's everybody's, it's everybody's right not to participate in a militia. Okay. Now, we can get into the speedy trial, we can get into all this other stuff, but what I want to talk about here is, how do we know we've got a tyrannic government? What's the definition of tyranny? Okay, we've got 4 of them. An absolute ruler, unrestrained by the law or the Constitution. A usurper of sovereignty. What are you reading from? This is my notes. I'm winging this, okay? A ruler who exercises absolute power, oppressively or brutally. And finally, one resembling an opposing or a repressive ruler in a harsh use of authority or power. Does any of this apply? I mean, does this sound like we've got something like this going on now? Yes, we do. Now, how do we know that? We've got an area where our Constitution, the main body of the Constitution says you can only operate in this box. We got 3 separate portions of the government all fighting for power. They're way outside of their limits. And what are they doing? They're trying to take away our rights to defend ourselves from a tyrannic government, which is our first 10 amendments. You can't have an automatic weapon. You have to apply for a gun safety. You can't have more than 2 weapons at your home. Oh, by the way, you can't take a gun on the plane to defend yourself. Now, we also get back to search and seizure. Hey, how many people fly? Okay, how many people just willingly? We're trained.
Yeah.
Okay? I can tell you, you don't have to do that. I get away with it. Okay? I'm on their list. I'm on their shit list. When I come in, it's like, come on through. They don't want to see you. Okay? You carry a bunch of constitutions, you explain to them that this is against my rights. Do you have probable cause? Watch them crap their drawers. They'll send a constitutionalist over to try to tell you, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, I usually head to the airport an hour early and my wife follows. So,
To counter that, can't they sit and say, okay, if you don't want to be searched, you don't get to fly?
and then I say,
There's the door.
then I remind them, there's a little article called, Title 42. If you usurp any of my constitutional rights, I can sue you. And I also hand that to them. Okay? If that happens, guess what they do? Come on through, sir. Come on through. Now,
When they put your bags through, because that's also a search, right?
yeah, no, if the guys are giving me a hard time, no, I won't put my bags through. I've only been held up once, and they got nailed, okay?
What was the result? Did you wind up flying that day, or?
No, I wound up flying the next day, but I filed against them, and I let them know that I was fixing to sue them. Oh, man, let me tell you, I had people calling from everywhere. What can we do? What can we do? This is what put me on this list, that as soon as my name comes up and they see me, come on through, come on through. They don't screw with me anymore. So, you know, if you're a rabble rouser, but you know what you're talking about, they will finally leave you alone. They'll try to press you at first. Don't give up, okay? You have the right. You know what you're talking about. And that's how you handle this. So, in short, our government is growing, our rights are shrinking. We've got a tyrannic situation here, and if we don't do anything about it, we're gonna lose. Yes, sir?
I had a similar experience with a variety of agencies. One was the INS, one was the city fire department, the other one was OSHA, and the last one was MSHA.
Mm-hmm.
An INS agent came into me and said, I'd like to see your I-9 files.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat, rested my hand on my filing cabinet, and I said, you know, I think this would make a really good constitutional case. And he looked at me and he goes, you're dead serious. And I said, it's a heart attack. He said, I'm 6 months away from retirement. I don't need this. Packed up his stuff and left.
They got all sorts of excuses.
Fire department, I had an office that they had just enacted the split smoking areas. And I was in California, and my manager called me up and said, the fire marshal was in here and said, we have to segregate the offices of smoking and non-smoking. I said, okay, so he did. So they came back a few days later and said, no, you can't do that. You have to do it this way. And so I got back a couple days later and I put a sign on it was a glass door. I put a sign on the door that says, any government agency is not allowed to enter this without a non-ex parte search warrant. And so
Bingo.
I'm standing up there and here comes the fire chief, fire marshal, and his assistant, both wearing uniforms. They looked at that sign, and I said, I opened the door, and I said, can I help you? He said, well, we'd like to conduct an inspection. I said, you've had 2 inspections, they both failed your own standards. Go get a search warrant. About 6 weeks later, the guy came up, they came back, and they knocked on my door, and I answered, and he said, can we talk to you? I said, you are talking to me. And he said, well, I said, you come in, but you can't come in officially. So he came in my office. I sat there and smoked a cigar, blew smoke in his face. And he said, you've busted us. You've run me out of money. I spent more time trying to get my attorneys to get a non-ex parte search warrant. I give up. What do you want? And I said, out of my office. He left. And that was it. In the case of OSHA, my company, which is a mining operation, had the largest number of citations of any private agency, private company.
You need to stop right there. Citations, do they have authority? Do they have jurisdiction?
Not a mining operation.
No, they don't have jurisdiction. Let me tell you why. Look at the Constitution. We have a contract. Anywhere in those 3 branches, I want you to look in there. Can you find anything in there that states they have law enforcement authority? Can you? Okay, so who has law enforcement authority and how? It's the states. The 10th Amendment gives us that. Okay?
Well,
if they don't have it, no. They have no jurisdiction.
This is state OSHA.
State OSHA.
State OSHA.
Okay, I thought you were talking federal.
No, well, see, this is the state plan, which means the federal government gives them money.
Oh,
to
so they
enforce
shore up our
federal-
Constitution through the state.
Correct.
Okay.
It was run through the Environment Department. Now, we're a mining operation. Mining operations are not under OSHA. But because MSHA didn't take jurisdiction, technically it defaulted to OSHA. That's not what the law says.
OSHA who? State or federal?
State, it's
State.
called occupational safety and health board.
Okay.
OSHP, it's not.
Well, that's different.
Right.
Okay, well,
Oh, I see.
anyhow, we had 195 citations, $660,000 in fines. Now, this isn't a mining operation. We went before, I told them, I said, you didn't have jurisdiction, this is an MSHA facility. Go away, and they came back with a court order. Next thing you know, I'm before a judge in Santa Fe,
Court order from who?
a district court judge in Santa Fe.
Okay, so it was a district court, not an administrative court.
No,
Because we have administrative courts in the
Well,
state.
this is even more fun. Okay, so we go through 35 inspections, like 12 court hearings. I get cited for contempt of court. I'm sentenced to 3 days in jail and a $1,000 fine, which he suspends. And then my attorney had sent a letter to Pete Domenici and said, this is a mining operation, you need to look into it. So MSHA takes jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But what happens is when MSHA takes jurisdiction, they issue me 19 citations for violating OSHA regs, or MSHA regs, because I had complied with
Whose regs are they? States or federal?
MSHA's federal.
And so they're citing you for federal regulations?
They're citing me for.
The state is citing you for federal
No,
regulations?
MSHA's a federal agency, they cited me for violating MSHA regulations because I had complied with OSHA.
Anybody seeing a problem here? Is there a pattern here? See, what they do is they pile on the bullshit so nobody knows what's going on, and then they nail you.
I went through 6 attorneys in this case, and I eventually ended up handling this pro se. Well, when MSHA took jurisdiction, the district court judge in Santa Fe said, oh, OSHA never had jurisdiction. I'm vacating this case because of judicial liability. Which means I could have sued the judge for not having jurisdiction. Okay, well, that's a lot of fun, except you find an attorney willing to sue a judge?
Yeah.
No, you do it pro se. We'll talk about that afterwards.
All right. Anyhow, the net upshot was all the case was thrown out.
And how much did that, what was the bottom line? What was the bottom line? What did that cost you?
Probably $60,000-$70,000.
Okay, so they taught you a lesson the back doorway.
Well, they put
Okay,
me out of
and that's what they do. Okay?
business. They put me out of business.
We can't put you in jail, but we're gonna cost you a lot of money. Okay, now, that brings up 2 important points. Amendment number 10 and number 9. These 2 are huge. Okay, the enumerations. Remember I talked about enumerations? That is what is given to the government, in that small little box they have to operate in. That's enumeration. So, the enumerations in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed or denied or disparage others retained by the people. What's that telling you? If we understand that what they're doing is wrong, we invoke our 9th Amendment. Okay? If we know the Constitution and we know what they're doing is absolutely contrary to the Constitution, and we can prove it, you invoke the 9th Amendment. That's for we the people. That's for we the people. Now, when you do that, that's pretty strong. Now, here's something else. You do a search. See how many cases that have made it to the Supreme Court on the 9th Amendment. 0. You know why? Because they don't want to fight it. They'll leave you alone. Okay? Because if it goes there, it's going to set precedents and everybody's going to be doing it. 0. Okay, now, there's been quite a few that have gone on the 10th Amendment. And I got a couple books up here, and you want to talk about 10th Amendment rights. Everybody knows who Richard Mack is? Sheriff Mack? No, I can't believe that. Wow. Anyway, you need to read this. And this is about 10th Amendment rights. He was a sheriff in Arizona, and the feds told them, you have to go out and arrest certain people under these conditions, and you got to do it at your own expense. Now, what they were asking him to do was unconstitutional, and they wanted him to pay for it. He refused to do so. He did that. He ended up suing the federal government, and I think 3 other sheriffs jumped on board because of the same issue, and guess who won?
Sheriff.
The sheriffs won.
Nice.
Darn straight they did. Okay, 10th Amendment, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or, not and, or to the people. Those two take care of us. Okay? Now, they're working hard to take all of these away from us, and they're expanding. This meets the definition of tyranny. We got to fight back. How are you going to do that? You have to understand the Constitution. You have to have some cojones to use it. And if we all do this together, guess what? There's 300 million of us. Do you know how many federal employees there are? Approximately 20% of that population. You know how many of those federal employees would say bye-bye if they could find another job? Over 70%. And that's because they're on our side. Okay? They don't like it, but they've got a damn good job. Plus, they're hoping they're going to have some retirement someday. So, anyway, I could go on. I'm hoping I gave you enough here that it'll get your passion up, your hunger up. You want to study this. You need to do this, and you need to apply it. Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain how the military is connected to Commander-in-Chief? And why does he have so much power? I mean, I know he's the Commander-in-Chief, but isn't there something between him and the military?
No, there is
So
not.
he could control the military however he wants.
Well, no. You have to look at Article 2.
Yeah, Congress has the ability to declare war. But then once we're in that war state, then the president is commander-in-chief.
He's Commander-in-Chief, correct. But, and this has been tried, and this has happened just here in the last couple of years. If we don't like what the president is doing, and he refuses to listen to us, what did we do? I think it was 4 years ago. We defunded him for approximately 6 weeks. Okay, we defunded him, and guess what? He had to turn around because there was no money to take care of him. Now, I happened to be in the military when this happened under Reagan. Okay, I was over in Germany. I was a E4 in the Army. I went for 2 months without pay because they were fighting and pissing over the budget and what they were doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they let us hang over in Europe when this happened. That's how that's handled, okay? If the president is not responding to us, you can get enough people to vote to defund them. That's how you check the executive branch, okay? The executive branch does not run the money, even though they think they do. That money is run by the House. The House, okay? The budget comes from the House. Who handles the money in the Treasury? The House. Who does the House represent? The people, okay? But do we have anybody that's got a set of balls in there?
No.
No. So they will not utilize this because back there, they get hammered. You know, you might not get reelected. We make sure you won't get reelected.
I have a question for you. Is the fast track Trans-Pacific Partnership being run in an unconstitutional way?
I don't know. I couldn't address that.
Okay.
Yes.
Who in the current crop of 12 candidates would you say would be the strongest enforcer of the Constitution?
Oh, you're really going to ask me? All right. Let me tell you. The one I think that understands the Constitution the most and can apply it is Ted Cruz. Okay, now, let me tell you something. He's not eligible to be president. So I would not vote for him.
Why?
Canadian.
Why? Where was he born?
Canada.
Canada. Where was his mother born?
America.
Where was his father born? Cuba. He's not eligible.
Obama is eligible, so is Cruz.
Oh, no, Obama is not eligible, but that's another story. Okay? Obama is not eligible, and I'll tell you why. Okay, your parents, both parents have to be citizens. What? Really? No,
Just one.
two. It's not in the Constitution, but it was in, and this is where you gotta get interpretation,
The definition.
and you have to look at what the founding fathers were doing. How are you gonna do that? The Madison Notes. Has anybody ever heard of the Madison Notes? Okay, you gotta get in there in the Madison Notes. If I remember right, this was early July when they talked about this. All you have to do is read this. What they were worried about is if an executive president got in there and he had loyalties to another country, he could exert his power to help another country or entity. Like the Muslims? So what they expected was the parents had to be born in the United States and then their offspring were eligible. Now, that's not the same for the Senate or the House. This is the only place where they discussed this, and somehow it didn't get written in there. But everybody agreed to that. So I believe that is the intent.
But
Now-
weren't a lot of the guys that wrote the Constitution, they were born in America? They were
See-
born in England. The guys
Okay.
that wrote the Constitution.
All right.
A lot of their children were
They,
born
they,
in
they
America.
took care of that in, let's see, I think it's in Article,
Yeah, it states from a certain point going forward.
yeah, let me see here.
That goes into effect.
Since we're getting very
I'm sorry.
close to the end of the time, I think if any of you have any more questions and want to corner them or take them out in the parking lot.
Don't beat me up, all right?
But,
Could we
if
just
we
have
could
some
hold our,
contact information?
Oh, it's Article 5, okay? Article 5 addresses your question, okay?
Mark, we just have contact for you?
Oh, yes,
Right.
I live in Ruidoso. My office number is 575-257-3681. My wife is my boss, I work for her. So if you need to get a hold of me, talk to Brenda. Just tell her this is about the Constitution or something along those lines. She understands, she's a good constitutionalist. She'll hook you up with me, and then, you know, if you want me to come down and talk, or you want to discuss something, or you need resources.
Can you repeat that number one more time?
575-257-3681, or I can give you my email address. It's Seidel, SEIDEL, @hotmail.com.
What type of medicine are you practicing?
Good. Family practice. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.